Chapter 8. Plus player announcement. You have entered the Pocket of Sanctuary. This is a trick-type dungeon. One-time plus player tooltip. Trick-type dungeons differ from core dungeons in that they're hardly dungeons at all. Anything from instantaneous death to slow digestion awaits those who don't properly scout ahead. These dungeons are usually the product of a gargantuan mimic or a colossus black hole spider, but can be the result of anything. Always be careful when jumping headfirst into a dark, ominous hole. Defeat the creature who created the dungeon to escape. One-time plus player tooltip. You have entered a friendly dungeon. A lesser dungeon crystal is available for your use. Recovery times are decreased. It was a large, egg-shaped room with a flat floor. To be fair, everything was large to Ben, but when the rest of the party entered, he was able to compare the room size to Short Bus. It was big. At the center of the room was a floating, smooth gray boulder. It looked like literally any other large boulder that might be sitting around anywhere on Earth, and other than the fact that it was floating, it was the single least magical-looking thing Ben had ever seen. In front of it was a sign, the exact same type that Ben had seen in the bland, endless superstructure that contained all those portals he'd gone to after getting chased around by that demon in the portal labyrinth. Ben flew over to it, and the rest of the party shuffled forward to check out the sign as well. Behind them, the archway stood completely open and unguarded, showing an unobstructed view of the outside world. A strange, aberrant creature landed on the ground. It was a purple monkey. One bright red eye was large to the point of being disgusting, and the other eye was normal in size. It had knives for hands and sharp teeth. "Shit!" Ben shouted, turning around. "Get ready for a fight!" The party jumped into action. Somewhere, someone rolled a critical failure. Short Bus's tail crashed into Red, who fell forward and hit Ghost Ears with her antlers. Vivi hadn't even reacted to Ben saying, "Get ready for a fight." The funky monkey, as Ben instantly named it, opened its mouth like it was screaming, but no sound made it through the archway. It ran forward and invaded the area without any resistance. Ben had his short sword in hand, thinking he was ready to do something, but it never came to that. The monkey jumped forward, and then the monster was swallowed up by a utility pocket. Ben heard a distant, muffled scream and thump, followed by silence. Another funky monkey fell from the trees and, followed by 3 of its cohorts, charged the suspicious portal in the middle of the forest. Muffled screams, followed by a thump, 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 and then silence. "Well, I feel safe," Ben said, then flew over to the sign. "Welcome to the Pocket of Sanctuary. Due to the complex nature of this ability, and in response to the fact that it was gained when your lesser elemental absorbed a raiment of power from a pure beast, and in response to the fact that it is technically a friendly-owned dungeon, you are owed an explanation. Don't get used to it. It will last for 12 hours. This is a one-time use skill. Anyone not in your party who enters will be rapidly accelerated via utility pockets and shot against a hard surface until dead. This process consumes the dungeon's mana, which is not inexhaustible. The dungeon will not collapse if it runs out of power. The Pocket of Sanctuary has the constant effect of Dungeon Mana Siphon and Dungeon Mana Forge. It will rapidly absorb and refine ambient mana. The denser the ambient mana, the more powerful the dungeon becomes. As this is technically a dungeon, it grows from absorbing ambient mana, and from the deaths of those who enter it. This is not a persistent location. When the duration of the dungeon has ended, all accumulated mana and experience will be converted into a bonus for the party. This accumulated mana and experience may be spent before the duration has ended. See the dungeon crystal for more details. The party had recovered from their critical fail and gotten back up. Ghost Ears had a minor injury from getting hit by Red's antlers, but other than that, everything was fine. Outside of the portal, an eerie floating eyeball gazed in. Then, with malevolent silence, entered the pocket of sanctuary. It vanished too, and Ben heard another muffled thump, like something far away had just smashed into a wall. The smooth boulder in the center of the room had attained a faint luminosity. "We're safe. Everybody read the sign and then get some rest. Vivi, you know about dungeon crystals, right? You're a dungeon owner."
"Yes, well, I wasn't the most active dungeon owner," Vivi explained. "And as soon as the reliquary guardian entered the picture, I was more of a dungeon tenant than a dungeon owner. The last thing I did was purchase that enormous pool of honey to keep it sedate and happy." "You found a reliquary?" Ghost Ears asked, looking from Ben to Vivi. "Where?" "Right under Strange Town's nose," Vivi said, sounding a little full of himself.
"Hey, Viv, next time I say get ready for a fight, you might want to pull your head out of your ass and, react," Ben said, poking a hole in Vivi's constantly inflating ego.
"When did you say that?"
Vivi asked, rapidly gliding across the surface of the room, inspecting it.
"This really is such an amazing skill, Ben. You really broke that perk when you created Frankie. He was a minor elemental when he got this thing, which is just wow."
"I really want to have this discussion," Ben said, floating to the dungeon crystal, "but we're on a timer. Can you sum it all up in a single sentence?"
"Frankie progressed from minor to lesser, but he got the ability when he was a minor elemental, which means the ability immediately progressed and will continue to progress as Frankie moves through the tiers of elementals. It's a sort of best-case scenario for the growth of a powerful ability in an elemental rather than him receiving a powerful ability later in his progression."
"That's a run-on sentence," Ben said absently. "This was a one-time use ability. And you can't just tack on information with a semicolon, Vivi. I once heard an editor mumble that at a coffee shop, so it must be true. Also, Short Bus is deaf, and he heard me say get ready for a fight. So, I suggest you stop thinking about power progression and start thinking, by my wiggly eye stalks, I'm in a forest full of monsters. Make sense?"
"Wiggly eye stalks. That's a silly way to swear,"
Vivi commented, and continued his zooming exploration of the egg-shaped room. "Lord Ben," Red called out to him. "It's Prince Ben, and don't call me either," Ben said, a small part of him disturbed at how deeply his class identity had merged with his own. The most frightening thing was, he felt it wasn't even a quarter of the way done. Not even 25% integrated with his psyche. He adjusted his crown. "When are we going to begin the purge of the Overcavern Forest?" "Very, very soon," Ben said. "I just want to—" "Your Highness," Ghost Ears said, apparently impatient and jumping into the conversation, flying over to Ben. "You mentioned a reliquary, and I think that due to the circumstances, it could contain a weapon or some useful object." "Okay, I'm just going to figure out this dungeon crystal thing, because I've got a great idea." "Ben!" Short Bus shouted, jumping up from the ground where he'd immediately laid down for a nap. "I got a new class! I'm a questor! Oh, man! I got some great skills in my main class, too, I got!" Short Bus said, then was stopped when Vivi shot over to him and glided slimelessly up his body, resting on his gigantic nose, looking him in the eye.
"Oh, as a future royal sage, I must catalog all your abilities. Please tell me first, and I will record the information. Ben, could you come over here and witness this?"
"Ben," Red said, walking over to him, looking at him with her incredibly eye-searingly fuchsia eyes. "Every moment we delay allows the gremlins a chance to pull more beings from the beyond. I fear what will happen if they are allowed to continue for even a moment longer than necessary." "I'm definitely on it," Ben said, feeling his mind getting pulled in exactly 5 different directions and feeling the strain on his brain. He pointed at Ghost Ears and felt his crown go hot. "I declare you Lord Chancellor of my kingdom, he said loudly, and Ghost Ears felt something settle on his shoulders, like a heavy cloak made of responsibility. Congratulations! Keep everyone away from me for like 5 minutes. Ben felt his crown suddenly go cold, like ice. No, Ghost Ears said, shoving the responsibility off. I'm not going to be your village chief. Ask me nicely. Fine, I can respect that, Ben said, his crown feeling uncomfortable. Please keep everyone away from me for 5 minutes. Ghost Ears gave Ben a grin, then flew over to Red and started speaking quietly to her. I have got to hire that guy, Ben said quietly to himself. Then, no longer being distracted, flew to the dungeon crystal and put his hand on it. Another honest-to-God game menu appeared in front of him, like with the temporary town crystal. Instanced dungeon crystal, growth grade, location pocket of sanctuary. Time remaining, 11 hours, 54 minutes, 30 seconds. Total points available, 185. Upgrades available for purchase. Bonuses available for purchase. Unlock rewards preview menu for 5 points. Ben rolled his eyes and spent the points to see if his idea was even worth it. He scanned the new menu that showed potential rewards, his eyes getting wider and wider as he got down into the more valuable stuff. Holy shit, Ben said, realizing something critical as he began to scan through the available bonuses and upgrades. Pocket of Sanctuary was not a defensive skill. This is a fucking mini-game, Ben said, eyes wide. Then he shouted, Hey! Get over here! Team huddle, now! The group looked up from what was undoubtedly a gripping lecture about magic and skills delivered by an extremely self-important-looking Vivi and rushed away from the Aeon Slug, leaving him frozen mid-word. Shortbus immediately went into the huddle, laying down flat on his front so that his head was close to a level to Ben. Red and Ghost Ears came over, Ghost Ears stood, and Red shrugged and laid down on her front. Ben did his best not to stare at her naked, prone body, controlling his eyes carefully and aiming them solely at the enormous, energetic cloud eyes contained in her antlers. Ben failed, multiple times, but his intentions were pure, even if his eyes were occasionally stronger than his will. Vivi slugged his way over, looking slightly put out, but then he brightened when he got into the group huddle. So it was that the extremely tiny members of the party stood, while the normal-sized members laid down to be on a level with them. It was a testament to the potential of the group that every single one of them was taking the situation seriously. This thing hands out treasure, Ben said without any preamble. What? Vivi asked, his highly expressive, spherical eyes lidding into a frown. Treasure! You can buy stuff from it! No, only town crystals can do that, Vivi explained. Well, this can do that. It's not for money, it's for points. Well, a few health potions wouldn't be out of place, Vivi said, not understanding the excitement. What about? Ben said, trailing off and building some drama. A premium perk lottery ticket! Ben's voice was loud, and he expected an uproar. There wasn't one. Oh, that's good, Ghost Ears commented. Those are pretty nice. How do we get points? It gains points over time by refining mana, Ben said, a little let down. And also when monsters come in and die here. Just like a dungeon, Vivi said, laughing. Yeah, it's classified as a trick dungeon, Ben said, starting to mentally move past his whole plan. Was there anything else? Vivi asked, apparently doing his best to give Ben a shot to salvage the situation. There was a whole bunch of stuff, Ben said, mentally going over the list. Potions, elixirs, blueprints. Blueprints, Ghost Ears whispered, a frown on his face. Blank core, soul gems, perk and skill lottery tickets, small keys, large keys. It sells keys, Vivi said, alarm and avarice shining in his eyes. Yeah, it's got tabs and tabs and tabs. I couldn't have looked over it all if I tried. Vivi rushed over to the dungeon core along with Ghost Ears, who flew at top speed. I don't see the big deal, Ben said.
Oh, by the forest, Ghost Ears cried. There are relic keys for sale here.
Slime, Vivi yelled, his eyes literally getting larger, bulging on top of their stalks.
There are actual artifacts in here. That's a flask of plenty. Oh, it's expensive, but it's there. Ben, you're terrible at explaining things.
Lord Vivi, Ghost Ear said, his eyes wide, his voice weak. There is a map of Wish available for sale. One-time purchase.
No!
Vivi yelled, rapidly navigating menus till he got to where Ghost Ears was pointing.
Oh, yes!
Map of Wish? Ben asked as he, Short Bus, and Red all approached the dungeon core.
Ben, this is big,
Vivi said, his eyes starting to do that googly thing they did when he was excited.
This is our ticket to everything.
Why? Short Bus asked, rubbing his chin, eyeing everything around him with a restless gaze. He started to pace around the room. The movement seemed to calm him.
It's a map of Wish, Ben. It's a blank map. You wish for something, and then the map shows you where to find it, guaranteed.
Like what? Ben asked, trying to get it, and not getting it.
Let's say we said, System, I want an artifact of great power. Who cares? Anything at all. The system will then either find what you are looking for or create it. The map will show you the way, in detail, with notes about how to get there safely and claim whatever you asked for.
It's that simple?
Ben, it's that simple. These things are rare, even rarer than wishes in some respects and more useful. A wish can be great, but unless you have access to a city crystal and have a Build-A-Wish ticket...
There are Build-A-Wish tickets for sale, Ghost Ears whispered, wiping a hand down his face.
By the aeons,
Vivi said.
But unless you have both of those things, wishes tend to be unpredictable and unreliable. But this? A map of Wish? You can rely on that to get you what you asked for.
How much is it? Ben asked.
100,000 points, Vivi said, his face serious. That's a lot, but I think we can do it. Ben, I'm telling you, we need to get this, no matter what.
Everybody but Red looked at Ben with shining, greedy, excited eyes. Red turned her magical eyes to Ben, an expression of slight confusion on her face.
Is this going to help us defeat the gremlins?
Yes, Red, Ben said, determination glinting in his eyes. This is going to help us defeat them all. Red nodded, joining in on the enthusiasm of the rest of the party. Here's a plan. We go out and lure monsters in. One of the things we can buy is a full restoration for 500 points. A little expensive, but it will allow us to fight hard. Sound good? I like this plan, Short Bus shouted, then ran to the archway faster than any of them thought he would be able to move. He passed through it and began shouting something, though none of them could hear it as no sound passed through the archway. What he said, however, was clearly heard by everything and everyone in a nearly mile radius. Short Bus had screamed, "Oh no, I'm dying," and then used his razor-sharp teeth to create bloody, harmless wounds all over his arms. The blood was red and dripped to the ground. Short Bus's teeth were bloody, and his smile was every bit the apex predator of all the 7 seas. He flung his arms out with force and scattered the blood, fanning it out, letting the small droplets splatter against the trees and ground alike. The smell of the blood awoke a frenzy inside of him, and he bit harder, drawing deeper, spilling more vital blood. He screamed, a mummery of fear and pain as he scattered the blood, scattering the bait. Ben watched the scene play out in silence, with his eyebrows fully raised up. Holy shit. You have gained the levelless class, Questor. Skill gained, ? Visit a city crystal to select a quest skill. This class will grow in power as you progress on your quest. As the primary questor, you may choose any one of your abilities to share with your party. You have advanced to level 8. Skill gained, Imperial Glare, Strong Skin. You have advanced to level 9. Skill gained, Royal Instinct, Talent Scout. You have advanced to level 10. Skill gained, Royal Tantrum. You have achieved level 10. Your racial trait evolution can be activated or abandoned. You have multiple evolution options available to you. Elemental Fairy. Choose any element. As strange or as exotic as your mind can conceive, and you will become a true fairy of exceptional power. This is a final evolution and will not be offered again. Archfairy, Human. Increased size, magical ability, and physical power. High fairies are extremely rare and are considered the natural royalty among fairy subtypes. This is a branching evolution and starts you on the peak human evolutionary chain. You have chosen Archfairy Human. Your levels have been reset to 1. You have retained your classes, you have retained your skills. You have chosen to share the racial ability evolution with your party. Ben opened his eyes from his meditation and felt a wave of exhaustion sweep over him, his body growing hot. Ghost Ears shut his eyes. You have gained the class Questor. Skill gained, Evolution. You have advanced to level 16. You are now a level 16 Dreamer. Would you like to evolve? Ghost Ears selected yes. Red put her hand on the crystal and felt strange magic lay upon her body. Welcome to the world. You have successfully survived the wilds and found a dungeon crystal. Be proud. Many have failed to achieve even this much. Manual override. Level system has failed to initialize. No classes or levels are available to you. Red, what has happened to you is an injustice. Due to your unique way of entering the world, you have not been properly balanced and are thus ineligible for levels. In compensation for this, I have given you 2 powerful abilities. Believe me when I say this. They're some good ones. You have gained the title Beyonder. You have gained the ability System Looting. You have gained the ability Eyes of the Warden of the Beyond. Chapter 9. One of Red's eyes rose from her antlers and shot into the forest at a speed none of them would ever be able to match. To Ben, though he wouldn't be so tactless as to say it, she looked really lopsided. "Oh, man! You look like you're about to just fall right over," Shortbus said, having returned from his raging and blood-baiting. He immediately went over to Red and prepared to catch her. She was absolutely steady on her feet. They were standing a bit of a ways from the pocket of sanctuary. That area had already been cleared out of monsters by Shortbus, who turned out to be both a highly enthusiastic actor and killer. "This is so strange," she said, clearly keeping track of 2 completely different mental pictures. "I haven't changed my form even once since coming here, and neither have any of you. Is that normal?" "Oh, don't worry about that. People change forms all the time around here. I didn't even used to have arms and legs or be able to cross my eyes or anything," Shortbus reassured her. "And Ben didn't used to have wings either. Not much else has changed about him, though." "You realize I'm like 100 times smaller, right?" Ben said, trying to figure out a way to give Red a more accurate view of reality. Shortbus stared at him, really, really hard. then blinked several times.
"Oh, yeah, obviously. I was just telling a joke," he said,
playing it cool, then re-examining the rest of the party.
"But all of them have always been that small, right?"
"Yes," Ben said.
"You used to be larger,"
Ghost Ears asked, right around the time Vivi asked,
"How big were you?"
"Now's not the time," Ben said, then looked at Ghost Ears. "You look bigger."
"I was about to say the same thing,"
Ghost Ears said. Then his eyes widened.
"You look like an arch-fairy."
I hit level 10 and my racial trait, evolution, gave me the option to become an elemental fairy or an arch-fairy human. So, I picked the one with human in the description. What about you?
"I got the Quester class, and it gave me the evolution ability as well. It didn't give me options, it just asked if I would like to evolve. I didn't know it would take 10 levels. I'm only level 6 now, yet I don't feel much weaker." "Well, I'm a level 6 hunter,"
Short Bus shouted proudly.
"And a level 2 actor. And I've already evolved once. I'm
He trailed off, his energy deflating, and he seemed to sag over a little bit.
"I'm not a megalodon,"
he admitted, like someone coming out of the closet to their family or admitting a terrible addiction.
"I'm sorry, guys."
"I'm not sure what's going on," Red said, sounding like she was focusing on something else. "But when I touched the floating rock—" "The dungeon crystal," Vivi corrected, his voice proper. "The dungeon crystal," Red continued. "It said I couldn't get levels or classes. It called me a Beyonder and gave me 2 abilities." She said the word abilities like it was a question, hopeful for an explanation.
"It means the system gave you 2 powers you wouldn't otherwise have," Vivi explained, always happy to play the teacher. "Do you know which ones they are? Sometimes the system won't tell you."
"Eyes of the Warden of the Beyond," she said, "and system looting." Vivi started coughing, his eyes bulging.
"We need to kill a monster! Right now!"
he declared, suddenly full of bloodlust. "Why?" Nearly everybody asked that question at the same time.
"Because there's system looting, and then there's system looting," he said, unhelpfully. "And I need to know which one we're dealing with. If it's the former, that's fine. If it's the latter, we'll see."
"Well, we are surrounded by strange creatures," Red commented, her other eye rising from her antlers and growing in size to somewhere between a large watermelon and a small beach ball. Violet and fuchsia light illuminated the forest around them, and without much preamble, Ben felt his own awareness of the area around them grow dramatically.
"Whoa!"
Short Bus said, doing a jump turn, flipping a 180 to face behind him, his long, strong tail dexterously missing the entire party.
"It's like I've got eyes in the back of my head."
"The forces of chaos feared my eyes," Red said, her confusion giving way to a hard edge of anger and a soldier's discipline. "Because they allowed others to see them as well. Nothing is hidden from me," she said, and alarmingly Ben saw the canopy above them flinch. His mimic sense began to flash a warning, and the rest of the party seemed to be sharing in that as well. A huge chunk of what appeared to be branches and leaves dropped to the ground, landing a distance away from the party. It unfolded and revealed itself to be an enormous gorilla, a cyclops with one large eye and a strong-looking wooden body. The leaves seemed to melt into its body like they were retractable. It huffed at them and began to charge.
"Yes!" Short Bus yelled. "Another one!"
And immediately squared off in front of it, the purity of predatory aggression shining in his eyes. Once, Ben had talked with a professional dog trainer and gotten some advice about dogs and animals in general. The advice was this: the louder and more snarly the animal was being, the more it was trying to scare you off, get you to go away. Worry, but don't panic. The animal that looked happy as it charged you was the dangerous one. It was in a state of predatory aggression, and did not view you as a threat. It was not scared. It was looking forward to the confrontation because it was sure of its victory. Shortbus looked very, very happy indeed.
"That's a Cyclops canopy gorilla mimic," Vivi said, somewhat helpfully. "More commonly known as canopy gorilla—"
"Not the time, Viv," Ben said, aiming a utility pocket directly at the eye, and then launching a sharpened branch from it. The distance and the force took a small chunk of mana, but the results were gruesome and spoke for themselves. The blinded canopy gorilla screamed, which was all the invitation Shortbus needed. "Upsy-daisy!" he yelled, tackling the monster and lifting it over his shoulder, a demonstration of pure strength, and then running back to the pocket of sanctuary, ignoring the bites and scratches. "In you go!" He threw the massive monster, grunting with effort as he did so, and the creature's screams were cut short when it passed through the archway. "That's so fun," Shortbus said, laughing. "How many points did we get for that one?"
"I'll check,"
Vivi yelled, sounding happy, and like he wanted to call dibs before anyone else could. The Aeon Slug was absurdly excited about operating the dungeon crystal, like a little kid with a new toy. Ben had a thought. "Hey, Ghost Ears," he said, once Vivi was out of earshot. "You know much about Aeon Slugs?"
"As much as anyone else, Your Majesty,"
he said politely. "How, close to maturity is Vivi? Like, is he a full-grown adult?" When Ben asked the question, Ghost Ears did something new. He snorted, in laughter.
No,"
Ghost Ears said flatly.
"Aeon slugs never stop growing. The largest one is larger than a mountain range, and they are true immortals. How old is Vivi, do you know?"
"He said he was about 60, Ben said.
"Very young. He's very close to experiencing a growth spurt, a rather explosive one. It all depends on how much magic he is able to synthesize inside of his body. That's the primary means by which Aeon slugs grow. The more magic, the bigger they get."
Ben blinked several times. "You mean he's a teenager?" Ben said.
"I'm not familiar with the term, but it sounds right."
"He's a teenager," Ben repeated. "You mean I've been bullying a teenager with job interviews and stuff?"
I'm not sure I understand."
"I'm such an asshole," Ben muttered to himself. "Stupid fucking Prince class. I used to be nice." Vivi returned, bright-eyed.
"That canopy gorilla was worth 250 points! Oh, Shortbus, next time leave the body. I wanted Red to try out her new ability."
"Yeah," Ben said, clearly overcompensating. "Leave the body next time. Good job, buddy. Great work." Ben gave Vivi a big smile and a thumbs up. Vivi looked at him like he'd lost his fucking mind, then shook himself out of it and resumed his position in their hunter formation. Shortbus looked at Vivi, then at Ben, then at Vivi again. He mouthed an "oh" and nodded his head a few times, then winked at Ben, then mimed locking his mouth shut and throwing away the key, then pointing at Vivi and shaking his head from side to side.
"What's going on?"
Vivi asked. "Nothing," Ben and Shortbus said at the same time. "You're doing great," Ben said, while Shortbus said, "It's all going to be okay, little guy."
"I found them."
Red's voice was husky, deep and full of anger.
"There are hundreds of these little furry red-eyed monsters. Some of them are fighting with other monsters, but there's a group of them holding staffs made of bone with paint over their fur. Elder gremlins,"
Ghost Ears said, distaste bordering on hatred in his voice.
"They're the dangerous ones. They're cowards. I don't expect all of them to be so obvious. They like to hide in plain sight, letting their stupid, ignorant offspring look like obvious targets."
"They can't hide from me," Red said, her voice deepening even further, becoming almost raw, with unshed tears of rage as she started to walk forward.
"I don't care if Vivi is a child," she continued. I don't care about classes and levels and abilities."
A bolt of energy shot from the Overwatch eye above them, igniting a tree briefly.
"Because I can see them. They have something, and they're very excited about it. A captured soul inside of a gem. A soul so bright it's difficult to look at. When I was summoned after I killed the ones responsible, I found similar things in their village. They didn't have any light at all compared to this."
Ben felt something crawling down his spine. An omen. A memory.
"Vivi,"
Ben asked,
"remember when you met me and I told you about how the Greys of Greyport 3 had captured me and tried to turn me into a soul gem?"
"Greys," Ghost Ears said, his face scrunching in dislike. "The worst," he said and spat.
"Well, I remember," Vivi said. "But they failed, right?"
"Right, but I wasn't the first human they caught. The other human was a Quasar class as well, and they succeeded in turning them into a soul gem."
"Slime," Vivi swore. "You're serious?"
"Yeah," Ben said. "But when I asked them if they still had it, they didn't give me a straight answer. After that, there was the attack by the Violet Dungeon Corps, a huge tsunami."
"There's a purple core lurking around here!"
Vivi practically shrieked.
"Ben, you need to talk about things like that!"
"It's gone! It was in the ocean," Ben reassured him. "But it wiped out Greyport 3 with a tidal wave and washed everything into the forest. Vivi, do you think those gremlins found the soul gem?" Vivi froze. Literally froze on the spot, not moving at all. It was like someone had pressed pause on a YouTube video, leaving someone with a dumb expression on their face.
"I hope not,"
Vivi finally said, shaking himself out of it.
"I really hope not." "Red,"
Vivi said, his voice sweet.
"What color is the soul gem?"
"White," she said. "Pure, bright, blinding white."
"Well, fuck,"
Vivi said, sagging. "We're slimed."
"I'm getting worried, Lord Vivi,"
Ghost Ears said.
"Why? Why are we slimed?" "Because they're about to open the Beyond with a Quasar-class soul gem, Ghost Ears. I attempted it with a mere bright soul gem, many, many orders of magnitude weaker than a Quasar, and I was banished for putting all of reality at risk. I can assure you, should they succeed in their ritual, what they bring through has the potential to be, substantial. If we're lucky, it'll be an inevitable, like magnetism or time. If we're unlucky, it'll be something like death or entropy. Or in a worst-case scenario, an impossible will come through and void out a large chunk of reality before it retreats. Or they'll get the interdimensional equivalent of a squirrel,"
Vivi muttered. "How large a chunk?" Ben asked, his mouth suddenly dry. "Also, that's some really heavy shit there, Vivi."
"The Beyond is not a joke. As for how much, off the top of my head, the worst-case scenario would be about 60% of the universe. If we all died,"
Vivi continued, breaking the silence that had settled over them,
"but managed to stop them, it would be more than worth it. I, for one, don't want to die, but sometimes we don't get what we want. It was nice knowing you all, but I have a job to do,"
Vivi said, and began his slow death march towards the gremlins. Red started to walk with him. Ghost Ears followed without a word. "Well?" Ben asked Short Bus. In response, the shark started to walk forward, and Ben joined with them. Vivi sagged with relief.
"Oh, good. I was terrified I'd have to do this alone."
Chapter 10. Gremlins typically didn't have names. They were, "Hey you," and "Don't touch that," and "Go get me some food." Elder gremlins always had names, and they were the kinds of names that took several minutes to say properly and left any who attempted it out of breath and with a tired tongue. What gremlins, both elder and otherwise, had in common was a very strong sense of hierarchy. The elder with the most knowledge of the beyond, and its many, many secrets, was in charge. Below him were the elders with slightly less knowledge or position from that distant world. This continued on until there were no elders left, and after that was the first generation of gremlins. They would be at the bottom of the ladder until they in turn spawned a second generation, who would be on the bottom until they created their replacements. This continued on forever. There were only a few notable exceptions to this hierarchy, one of which was when a gross, slimy, pulsating gremlin cyst, the pods they were born from, burst and spat out something other than a gremlin. The elders had very little concern about the health and well-being of their spawn, viewing them as little more than an easy and fun-to-create kind of minion. When they had enough of them running around, they would begin to perform rituals and experiments on the gremlin cysts. The experiments varied, from dark prayers to evil beings they knew of, to injections of poisons and strange regents, even evil rituals. Pretty much anything they could think of, regardless of how likely it was to have a beneficial effect or not. It was careless and cruel, and overwhelmingly resulted in stillborns. Occasionally, the experiments were successful and produced a living gremlin. Very occasionally, the living gremlin was more useful than the standard model. Very, very rarely, what they produced was a true and utter monster. It was a fortunate thing, a very fortunate thing, that gremlins were terrible record keepers. They rarely bothered to approach these experiments on their own young as anything more than an amusing thing to do while drunk or angry or bored. The elder gremlins of the Over-Cavern Forest were no different at all in this regard. They had only the foggiest idea of what they'd done to produce the many larger and more dangerous varieties of gremlin that stalked the perpetually dim forest. The difference between them and the endless other gremlin tribes of the world was very simple. They'd been doing it uninterrupted for thousands of years. Nobody had ever bothered to plunge deep into the dangerous, mimic and fairy-infested Over-Cavern Forest for something so basic as a gremlin extermination. Why would they? The gremlins in the forest stayed in the forest, content to be gross little slime balls, their numbers managed by the monsters that preyed on them. Yes, the sunlit city of Solas, the official capital of the sunlit race, had better problems to occupy their adventurers. The higher elemental beings and the AIs that inhabited the city, along with the glorious sunlets themselves, just weren't that worried about it. Certainly they didn't have such a surplus of adventurers that they could afford to send them to die in the Over-Cavern Forest. So the gremlins sat unchecked for thousands and thousands of years, running their experiments, taking the occasional note, and growing in power. Now, finally, it was their time to claim prominence in the world. With the help of the mushrooms, they had been able to pull a wide variety of beings from the beyond, but their power source had been limited to the weak souls of their offspring. The eldest gremlin, who was old beyond old, gazed at the shining soul he clutched within his wretched, blood-stained hands. With an evil grin, he stroked the gem with his thumb, whispering to it. When he looked up once again, he saw a cyst of a grand size, nearly 30 feet tall and filled with an orange glowing fluid. Inside the pulsing light could be seen the shadow of a shape, curled up in the fetal position. The creature was tall and had great curved horns on its head. Sharp claws like daggers adorned its fingers, and its body had a sleek, scaly, almost reptilian appearance. It twitched and kicked with clawed feet, as creatures in the womb are prone to do. The eldest gremlin chuckled and continued stroking the soul gem. He hadn't wasted his opportunity with the summoner's brew, pulling some random creature through. No! He'd gotten in contact with some old, evil, and rather knowledgeable beings. Entities who knew the secrets of shaping flesh as easily as shaping clay. Who could see the monsters they could make of all things. The eldest gremlin had even bothered to take some notes, jot a couple of things down. He'd been trying to create a bladed slayer for thousands of years. Now, with the secrets he possessed, it was just the beginning. This one, however, he would imbue with the power of a quasar soul. Its greatest weakness was always that it would have the weak soul of a gremlin. "No more," the eldest said, and the elders behind him bowed their heads and repeated in unison, "No more." And, sitting among them, full-sized and without wings, was a young man with empty, flat eyes. The void soul owed so much to the gremlins, who had found him in the woods and recognized him as a kindred spirit. They had saved him, taught him, given him equipment. He wondered how much more they had to give him, and how much more he could take. A utility pocket appeared and vanished, depositing an apple in his open hand. He glanced over at the growing abomination and grinned. He'd overheard every madness-inducing word exchanged between the eldest gremlin and whatever terrible beings they'd contacted. Every technique and tool of the transmutation of flesh was recorded in his perfect mind. No way he was leaving. Not until he'd taken these gremlins for every secret they were worth. Chapter 11. Ben's party had no idea there was a gigantic horned monstrosity incubating in the gremlin camp for one simple reason. The camp was huge, and Red wasn't savvy enough to mention that sort of thing. Sure, her eye saw it, but as far as she was concerned, that was completely normal outside of the beyond. Her entire incarnation, as short as it had been, was one in which large, frightening monsters lurked around every corner. "I fear this may be my last battle," she said, whispering to the group. They were hidden some distance away from the badly guarded perimeter of the gremlin camp. Both of Red's eyes were stationed overhead, granting the entire party a top-down, RPG-style view of their surroundings. Of the five, only Ben and Red were completely used to and comfortable with that sort of view. "Don't talk like that, Red," Ben said. He was currently sitting on her shoulder. It had been weird at first, but it was really the only way to carry on a quiet conversation with someone. Otherwise, Ben would have to shout, and the other person would have had to keep track of him as he flitted about. "I fear I am going the way of the pure beast," she said, accepting her death. "Even now, I feel myself growing weaker. This body, while powerful, cannot sustain itself. I only hope I am able to destroy the gremlins before death claims me." "Well, what's going on? Like, is magic leaving your body?" Ben had a suspicion, but he was also worried. "I feel empty, hollow inside. My mouth is sticking together, and I am unable to move as strongly as I could when I was first born. The effects of entropy are taking their toll. How life is able to sustain itself in this universe is a true mystery." "Oh, what's that?" Ben's worry had vanished, and he'd pulled some of the enormous magical peas from his utility pocket. Then, wanting to bypass pretty much all of what would likely be a drawn-out explanation, he put it under her nose. She sniffed, scrunched her nose, got a what-the-fuck expression on her eyeless face, and her mouth opened up in an involuntary reaction. Put this in your mouth, smash it up with your teeth, then swallow it. It's called eating. You are hungry. Red ate, then turned her face to look at Ben more directly. More, please. Ben did his best not to laugh, and instead provided Red with food and water until she was satisfied. This is by far the strangest event of my life, she declared, taking a final drink of water from her cupped hands. Well, I'm glad you aren't dying, Red. Ben got up from her shoulder and flew over to Vivi, who was watching the area with both his eyes and with Red's. I think, he muttered to himself, we ought to catalog that eye skill. It's vastly superior to shared sight. I've got enough reputation with the system. I should be able to purchase a skill kit and attempt to formalize it. That would at least grant me the Sage class, a good start. Oh, Ben! Vivi, Ben said, standing next to the Aeon slug. He patted him on the back. Just a friendly bit of contact. Vivi didn't quite flinch, but he gave Ben a look. What's the plan? Vivi asked. Buddy, I've got nothing aside from a glorious charge. You have the glorious charge skill? That changes things. No, just a regular glorious charge. The kind powered by stupidity and bravery rather than magic. I just wish there were a way to, bring the pocket of sanctuary with us, you know? Well, Vivi considered it. Yes, that would be excellent. Ben continued, if it were walking around with big mechanical spider legs and had tentacles that shot out of it and pulled our enemies in. That would be super useful. It would be, Vivi said, then looked up at the well-concealed floating eyes above the party. I wish I'd bothered to learn the mind link spell. Then we'd have perfect awareness of our surroundings, as well as the ability to move as one being. I don't wish this, Ben muttered. But I wish I'd taken the worm enclosure. Then I'd be able to actually grant all these wishes I have. Well, then you'd also become a demonic life form, Vivi countered, then continued. Don't look surprised, Ben. I'm a member of the signatory races. He capitalized it in his speech. We get a newsletter from the system, and he also pays us out dividends, profits from the operation of the world. It's all held by our leaders in a great big trust, but still it's there. It ensures the eternal prosperity of our races, no matter what's going on in the world. Yeah, buddy, I've got no idea what any of that means. You're rich? My species is rich, and technically I own shares in that wealth. I've been banished, and I don't have access to any of those resources. What resources? Vivi, you're dancing around the issue. Come on, buddy, help me out here. It's nothing important, Vivi said, a sad, vulnerable look in his eyes. It's a resource that allows us to bypass the need for magic and wishes and barter directly with the system for the things we want or need. The shares, well, they're my personal property, my inheritance. Even if I've been banished, and I can't use the dividends, I still own the shares. That sounds nice, Ben said. Man, that sounds really nice. Shame it can't help us, though. I mean, it's worth it to die and disrupt whatever ritual they're doing. I get that. I accept that, Ben said. But I really don't want to die. I want to live and find out what's going on with the quest stuff you were talking about. I want to build a city from scratch, a place that exists to serve its people and to serve us, you know? It sounds selfish, but I want to be at the top of the pile. I want to be a winner and keep winning. Vivi had a sad and almost guilty look on his face. Excuse me. I need a few moments alone. It's nothing you did, I need to think. Please don't get mad.
Ben gave Vivi another friendly pat and flew off, leaving the Aeon slug to his thoughts. Short Bus and Ghost Ears were chatting quietly. Ghost Ears was sitting on Short Bus's right shoulder, so Ben went over and sat on his left.
"Right there. That's a whisper," Ghost Ears said, talking almost directly into Short Bus's earhole. "Like this?" Short Bus asked, still a little too loud to be a true whisper, but in a voice that wouldn't carry. "Even quieter, but yes, like that." Ghost Ears leaned away, and Short Bus's eyes were wide. "Oh, man," he whispered. "I can't hear this at all. Are you sure I'm really talking?" "You're talking," Ben said, then patted Short Bus's shoulder. "Good job. That's a whisper right there." The shark gently turned his head to the left, then to the right. "Ah, this reminds me of the good old days, back when I didn't have arms. I had this little school of fish that hung out literally on me. They'd eat my dead skin and crawl in my mouth and clean my teeth. They were great. Other sharks, they'd occasionally, accidentally kill one of their little buddies. It never happened to me," Short Bus whispered, grinning. "I was always careful. Check it out," he said, and opened his mouth, revealing sharp teeth, then poking them with a finger. "I don't need anyone to crawl around in my mouth anymore. I can clean my own teeth. Are you sure I'm talking?" he asked, looking at Ghost Ears, then winked at Ben. "Yes, you're definitely talking," Ghost Ears said, sounding exasperated. "I'm not sure I am. Tell me what I was just talking about." Short Bus challenged Ghost Ears, who sighed, and started telling Short Bus about how good he was at not killing his cleaner fish. Short Bus chuckled, then he turned his attention to Ben, his expression serious. "Ghost Ears, do you mind giving us a minute?" "I'll check in with Lord Vivi. It's been a pleasure, Short Bus." Ghost Ears got up and flew away. When it was just the two of them, Short Bus started speaking, his voice low. The whisper had been mastered. "Are we doing this? Because I'll be honest here, I don't like our odds." "I don't like 'em either," Ben said quietly. "But they're what we've got. Besides, you heard Vivi. This is some cosmic horror shit. What choice do we have? What are you thinking?" "No weapons, no armor, no idea of how to fight in a group." Short Bus started listing the things working against them. "No idea of what we can all even do. Did you know Red could shoot her eyes and let us see through them? I didn't. There's more," he said, giving Ben a look filled with resolve. "Red and I talked about it, and we're terrified of smashing one of you during a fight. It could happen, Ben. Bad things could happen in a fight, and it might not even be the monsters responsible." Short Bus looked uncomfortable. Well, I wasn't totally honest about the feeder fish. I counted them, I could tell them apart. I saw them so often. Sometimes, I'd lose one, and I wasn't sure why. Never thought about it too much till now. But I'm pretty sure I killed a few when I was sleeping. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable," Short Bus said, rubbing his arms like he was cold. "Because I can't get this picture of one of you dying out of my head. This horrible picture of me running around, having fun while one of you is dead and smashed against me somewhere, and not even realizing it till I wondered where you went. I can see it. I can even feel it. That moment I realize. It's horrible." Silence reigned like a tyrant, cruel and pitiless. Ben wasn't sure what to say to that. It wasn't like Short Bus's concerns were stupid or invalid. They were thoughtful and real. Ben hadn't even considered it, up until this point, about how the massive differences in size could be such a liability just within his own party. "Lord Vivi!" Ghost Ears shouted, his voice high with alarm. "Please, I beg you to reconsider!" "Get off of me! I have to do this!" Vivi yelled, and Ben turned his gaze towards the two. In front of them was a large, flat gray rectangle. It had a strange appearance, like the infinity effect that could be obtained by two mirrors reflecting one another. Except rather than fading to darkness, the further in one looked, the brighter it became. "Ben! Shortbus, help me!" Ghost Ears almost screamed. "Stop him now!" "Vivi!" Ben yelled, flying over at top speed and trying to get a good grip on the Aeon slug who was frantically trying to push past Ghost Ears. Shortbus put a hand in front of the doorway, and Vivi stopped, struggling. "What's going on?" Ben yelled, looking from fairy to slug. "He was going to sell his inheritance to the system. He was going to trade his rights, his signatory rights, for power, for an advantage, for a way to win. He'll be deprived of everything, reviled by his people." "I'm already reviled. I don't care. I need to do this," Vivi said, his eyes feverish. "I need to make things right. I need to stop them. I don't care what it costs." "Stop! Vivi, stop!" Ben then did the only thing he could think of, which was to punch the Aeon slug. Not very hard, but hard enough to shift his attention. "Now listen to me! Do not, I repeat, do not do whatever it is you are going to do. I don't fully understand it. I don't fully get it. But what I do understand and get is that you'll be losing something that you can't get back, correct?" "Correct," Vivi said, caught between wanting to glare at Ben and being grateful for having some sense punched into him. "So why don't we all talk about this as a group and see what we can do? If, and only if, we are completely out of options, then we all go through that weird portal and you can do your thing with the system. Okay?" "You punched me," Vivi said, sounding grouchy. "But okay, don't punch me again. I think I'm going to get a bruise from that." "I didn't punch you that hard, but okay." "You punched me pretty hard." "No, I didn't," Ben said, then decided to walk away from the conversation. The group huddled together, Red's eyes still providing them supernatural awareness of their surroundings. Nothing would be able to sneak up on them. "So we need to bust into a gremlin camp. They've got like 1,000 little furry weirdos and a bunch of big boys running around. Their aim is fucking amazing, and they all have bows and arrows. If anyone's got a trump card, please share with the group." "I can control the minds of those who stare into my eyes," Red said, starting the discussion. "Also, I can possess corpses with them. Only 2, though, for obvious reasons." "Okay, good to know," Ben said. "I can put others to sleep and make them dream," Ghost Ear said. "But not very many. I have dual-wield swords journeyman." "Okay. A little more crowd control, that's good," Ben said. "I don't even know all the spells and skills I have available to me," Vivi admitted. "I've been collecting them so long that my status sheet is unreadable." "There are status sheets?" Ben asked, getting excited. "Not for anyone who isn't one of the signatory races," Vivi said. "Or at least not a status sheet you can access without specialized tools and skills." "I'm big, strong, and I don't mind pain," Shortbus said, shrugging. "And also, I can read minds and launch a powerful area of effect psychic assault. It's called Psycone, and it's really nasty." "That's great," Ben said. "Well, I've got my utility pocket. You all know about that." "I don't think that's enough," Shortbus said. "We could really mess some stuff up, but it's not enough. We aren't getting out of there alive if we go in. Sorry, someone had to say it." Red pursed her black lips, then pointed to Ben. "You walked with the pure beast, yes? What did she say to you? You have her body, correct?" "Yes, I walked with her. She asked us to use her body to eat her, and use her skin and bones to build a better future, and yes, I do have her body."
"Please, bring it out. I wish to see."
"Okay," Ben said, and moments later, Betsy's body was gently deposited on the ground. Even in death, she looked peaceful, like she could open her eyes at any moment.
"Incredible,"
Red said, reaching a hand out, then retracting it, before extending it out again and speaking.
"System looting,"
she declared, and then was silent.
"Did it work?"
Vivi asked, looking excited.
"It says it could convert the body into a single item, and that 87% of the corpse's potential would be lost in the conversion."
"Should I do it?" "No!" Ben was pretty sure every member of the party said it.
"I won't, then,"
she said, retracting her hand and sounding a little defensive.
"I won't do it."
"Could we," Ghost Ears said, coughing, try and process the body?" Ben felt his skin crawl at the idea, but had to admit they were running out of options.
"Like, skin her?"
Ben said, looking at the body and feeling it would be the highest of crimes, yet knowing it was what she asked to be done.
"I have some, experience with leatherworking. We could attempt to expose the—"
he coughed again.
"the meat. I believe eating it would grant us a great boon."
Ben felt his face get hot. His eyebrows were all the way up, and he was shaking his head no, but his mouth rebelled against his body.
"Try it,"
Ben said with a sigh. Ghost Ears approached the body, his sharp silver swords gleaming with a sheen of magic.
"These are enchanted for sharpness and durability,"
Ghost Ears said, talking out loud to distract himself from his task.
"They should be more than adequate."
He took a few deep breaths, then began to press his sword against the body near the chest. He frowned, then pushed harder, the skin moving but not cutting.
Just a little bit more,"
he said, then really put his back into it. Nothing. "I could try," Short Bus said, and Ghost Ears handed him the little swords. It was, in many ways, an utterly hilarious scene. Short Bus had to pinch the sword between his index finger and thumb, and began to push against Betsy's body. It looked like he was holding one of those little plastic swords they sometimes used to skewer fruit in restaurants. The sword slipped, slashing at the hide. Not a single hair was cut, nor was a single mar visible on the hide. Short Bus handed the sword back to Ghost Ears, who examined it, then swore, saying something in a language none of them could understand.
"Dull! It dulled my sword,"
he said, then started swearing again. Nobody understood it, but it was definitely swearing. Swearing is a universal language.
"Put it away,"
Vivi said, sighing.
"There's no way we can process it. That's a pure beast, and a kind even rarer than a unicorn. She's lived her entire life in the Pure Lands, grazing on void knows what, plants and grass and fruits that even heavenly beings would be envious of. Her body must be close to indestructible, and her only weakness was impurity. Slime, I'm hungry just thinking about it,"
Vivi said, sighing. "They're that great, huh?" Ben asked.
"If I had some of those," Vivi said, "I'd be able to increase my power 100-fold instantly."
Ben stared at Vivi, then put the body away in his utility pocket. Then he continued staring at Vivi, maintaining an uncomfortable, direct stare, looking directly into his pupils, maintaining full eye contact. Ben had gotten an idea. An awful idea. A wonderful, awful idea. "Vivi," Ben said, a portion of his mind examining Betsy's body in extreme detail inside of the utility pocket, analyzing her. "How badly do you want to help the team out? I mean, how far are you willing to go exactly?"
Ben, you're making me uncomfortable, Vivi said, starting to slowly scoot away from Ben's intense, unrelenting gaze. See, Vivi, I figure you're willing to do just about anything, right? I mean, you were about to sell your racial inheritance to the system, right? Yes. Say it, Vivi. Say you're willing to do anything. Promise me you'll do whatever it takes to save all of reality from those awful gremlins. Well, I promise you I'll do whatever it takes. Good! Because I just finished examining the inside of Betsy's stomach and her intestines, and they're just plumb full of magic, glowing, powerful-looking plants. Totally just the most magical things I've ever seen in my life. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, Ben said, and he couldn't keep a straight face anymore and started laughing maniacally. Because I'm pretty sure I can just pull that stuff out for you. Ben pulled himself together, sighed, and adopted his most sympathetic, convincing face. Vivi, please. The entire universe is depending on you. This is the only way. I need you to eat shit. At this point, Ben lost it again and started to laugh. Ben, Vivi said, his expression calm. I fucking hate you. I earned that, Ben said, speaking in between fits of laughter. But, oh, God! Ben was no longer able to keep himself composed. He was actually giggling, breathless with laughter. You've got to do it! It'll increase your power 100-fold! At this point, Short Bus absolutely lost it and started to roll on the ground with laughter. After they had all composed themselves and come to grips with the reality of the situation, they got started. While everybody's backs were turned, after they had formed a circle of dignity around Vivi, Ben began disgorging an enormous pile of glowing white, half-digested heavenly plants, herbs, and fruits. 4 stomachs worth. The piles got progressively more digested as Ben went from the first stomach to the last. He stopped around the time he reached actual shit. Vivi stared. Before him was a treasure trove, a collection of magic so potent, so utterly powerful, that it would be the prize of any Aeon Slug, anywhere, regardless of their size or age. Forget Aeon Slugs. It was a prize that wars would be fought over, wars among the highest-leveled beings in the world. It was simply priceless. It was all his for the taking. It also stunk, and Vivi wished he just didn't know from where it had come. So Vivi, swearing up a storm, using curses and words none of them even understood, chowed down. As he ate, his body began to grow larger and larger and larger, turning whiter and whiter, glowing. A palpable sense of magic suffused the air around him, like standing on a patch of ground that was about to be struck by lightning. Vivi did his duty with an admirable dedication, swearing yes, but never complaining. When he was done, not a single scrap remained. Ben stared up at the now human-sized Aeon Slug who glared down at the tiny fairy. Ben, Vivi said. Yes, Vivi. If you ever tell anyone how I got this big, this fast... No. If you ever tell the truth about how I got this big, this fast... He paused, his eyes completely serious. Are you listening? Yes. I will kill you. Okay? Okay, Ben said. Did it taste as good as it smelled? Short Bus said, laughing to himself, his whole body shaking. Vivi turned around, giving the shark his back, and said one word, his voice extremely quiet. Yes. Chapter 12. System Newsletter. A global historic record has been broken. Please join me in honoring Vivi, name shortened, the Aeon Slug. He has reached his first plateau of maturity in under 100 years.
The previous record was held by Durs, the legendary arch-wizard, who attained the first plateau in a short 280 years. Vivi has attained this feat by consuming a huge quantity of heavenly plants, herbs, and fruits obtained directly from the Beyond, and more specifically, the Pure Lands. As I've stated before, it's not against the rules for non-summoning classes to open portals to the Beyond, but it is beyond reckless. I kid. Congratulations to Vivi and Aeon slugs everywhere. A reward will be issued to the Bank of Aeons, with the option of delivery to the Bank of the Sun or the Bank of Eternal Magic. The reward is guarded by a custodian of the system and should be delivered with all haste to Vivi. His location in the Overcavern Forest is enclosed for speedy delivery. For any interested parties who wish to send their own gifts, congratulations, or job offers, I've also included his coordinates in this message. Great job, Vivi! Vivi. An enormous, buffalo-sized Aeon slug said softly. You fool. We warned you. We banished you. Yet you still have not learned your lesson. Thus, the machinery of justice was set into motion. The reward was sent to the central branch of the Bank of the Sun, located in Solas, along with a sternly written note detailing its manner of delivery. A squad was assembled, a team armed with magical weapons, enchanted equipment, impressive armor, and tactics and teamwork honed by years of experience. Their instructions were simple. Find Vivi, deliver the reward, banish the custodian who guarded it, and then kill the reckless Aeon slug who dared to open the Beyond and risk catastrophe. And also to confiscate any of the remaining herbs, plants, and fruits of the Pure Lands and deliver them to the Bank of the Sun. The order was issued in but a moment, and the machinery was well-oiled, efficient, and speedy. There were no second chances for fools like Vivi. Justice would be swift. Then, at the last moment, outside of the gaze of the swift and well-oiled machinery of justice, the team who had been assembled to fetch Vivi realized what a pain in the ass it would be. Slogging through the Overcavern Forest was a great way to get killed regardless of your level. So they pawned the job off on someone that someone else wanted dead. The Inevitable looked at the system, still sitting calmly in his chair, watching the show. As you can see, there is nothing I can do to help alleviate the situation, and I am a completely neutral party, the system explained, keeping a straight face. I can see that quite clearly, the Inevitable said, then motioned for the system to continue work on his character sheet. I know you think I'm stalling for time, the system said, indicating the massive stack of paperwork he'd been manually and meticulously filling out. And that's probably a fair assessment, but this really is a tricky situation. Why not just incarnate me as a regular human, with no special abilities, no plus perks, and no memories of who I am? The system looked up and gave the Inevitable a strange look. That would be wasteful. Your point value would be absolutely squandered. I could never do that. Apply the lost points, the Inevitable said, referencing the esoteric value the system assigned individuals and monsters in his balance system. To that poor soul you stranded on an uninhabited island in the middle of the ocean of illusions, with the title, The Last Human. That's a cruel joke, by the way. Oh, but it is funny. The system caught himself. You're serious? No memories? I can give you everything else, but the memories were the most problematic element of your induction. I don't need them, the inevitable said. I'll know what to do. I am my own destiny, after all. Well, all right, the system said, and a large glowing portal appeared in the room. It was blood red and gave off an ominous feeling of danger. I'll see you soon, the inevitable said, and stood up. He grinned at the system, and it was a tremendously unsettling smile. Very soon. Then he walked through the portal, and his mind was wiped clean. A regular human male stood in the portal labyrinth. He did not know who he was or why he was there. He looked at the world tabula rasa, blank, ready to learn. And he was already angry. Yes, he thought to himself. He was filled with a deep and implacable rage. Why am I angry? He asked aloud. The empty hellscape answering with the sounds of lightning strikes and humid, hot wind whistling across barren rocks. An enormous humanoid horseman walked slowly towards him. His fur was soaked in fresh blood, giving it a wet, greasy appearance. His eyes were the red of evil, full of wicked intelligence, and in his hands he held an enormous scythe. The man stood his ground at the demon's approach. Soon they stood within reach of one another. The demon regarded the man, who stood unafraid. Dost thou wish to learn the ways of rage? It asked, its voice a low hiss. The man thought about it, then nodded. The demon reached out a hand, and the man took it. They walked, and their path led to the underworld. And the man was unafraid. Frankie woke up inside the pocket of sanctuary, Ben's wish ringing in his pure, clever little mind. He didn't understand much, except his element, a trait all elementals tended to share early in their lives. But of their element, they were unmatched, peerless geniuses. Frankie examined the unique, skill-shaped utility pocket, analyzing its composition and its rules. Ben never could have pulled it off, but for Frankie, well, Frankie could do a lot of things Ben could never have done. Things he just wouldn't consider possible. But Frankie had to admit that he wasn't up to the job. He was just one lesser utility pocket elemental. It wasn't like he could... Then he'd had an idea. He sprang up, his front pointing in the air, and one of his front legs lifted straight up. Simultaneously, a soft flash of purple light burst above his head like a very dim camera flashbulb. If one were paying close attention to the colors of things, which tended to pay off in the world, they would note that the color of purple above Frankie was the exact same shade as the purple tendrils which so consistently surrounded a utility pocket. Frankie didn't run, because why would he ever run? Instead, he teleported nearly instantaneously, using a utility pocket, and moved himself to be right in front of the dungeon crystal. His front right leg stretched out a bit, then passed through another portal to extend his reach, allowing him to touch the dungeon crystal. Frankie possessed an extremely special mind, the kind that could parse through the encyclopedia of menus and submenus that the pocket of sanctuary possessed until he reached the store page he was looking for. Frankie frowned.
because the item he wanted to buy had previously been priced at 10 points, and now it had been marked up to 1,000. Frankie was able to effortlessly access why the change had occurred. He had been responsible, apparently, for the change in the rarity of this item. Frankie, for 1,000 points, purchased one wand of Create Minor Elemental. It appeared in his dimensional matrix, and without ceremony, Frankie opened a utility pocket facing his own body and pointed the wand at himself. The system asked him if he wanted to create a minor utility pocket elemental, and Frankie said yes. The wand burned with magic for a moment. Frankie felt a pleasant chill, and a new elemental plopped on the ground in front of him. It was identical to his minor elemental form. Frankie was so pleased, he bought another wand and repeated the process. Now there were 2 of them, and Frankie felt an instinctual hierarchy immediately form. They looked to him for instruction, and Frankie communicated with them via a complicated series of body language gestures. No, Frankie couldn't do what Ben wanted alone, but with some help, it wasn't impossible. Merely time-consuming. Chapter 13. There's been no change, Red said, her voice low, unnecessary eyebrows furrowed as she gazed through a distant hidden eye. We've still got some time left then, Ben said, now sitting between Vivi's eye stalks. My life is over, Vivi said, sounding despondent. They're gonna kill me and cut my guts open and see what they find in there. They wouldn't do that, Ghost Ears assured him. That's what I'd do. They'd have to be crazy not to, Vivi moaned, and Ghost Ears didn't have a response to that. I'm not so sure about this, Short Bus said, frowning, squinting his tiny eyes in the direction of the gremlin camp. The plan still seems a little light, you know. He held out an empty, upturned palm and pretended to be weighing something by bobbing it slightly up and down, which really impressed Ben because Short Bus had only had arms and hands for, less than 3 days. The shark was adaptable. I'll have you know, Vivi began, and then both Ben and Short Bus finished for him, that I'm a mature Aeon slug and I'm powerful and I can do this by myself now, they said together. Congratulations again, Lord Vivi, Ghost Ears said, his expression one of, shut the fuck up, you two, and tell him congratulations, he's a fucking mature Aeon slug. No, Short Bus is right, Ben said. I think our odds went up pretty dramatically, but those assholes are like bonkers accurate with ranged weapons. There's no way we get out alive. Then Ben, Short Bus, Ghost Ears, and Vivi devolved into the same circular argument they'd been having for what felt like hours. It hadn't actually been hours, but Red had yet to even be alive for a full day, and she was already exhausted. She felt many things. A restrained sense of grief at the loss of her home, overwhelming anger, hunger and thirst, tiredness, annoyance, and the inexplicable urge to go around and start touching and smelling people and things. Like everything, including her new body. She hadn't even properly looked at herself yet, really looked at herself, and it was exciting because she'd never looked at anything before. Her senses were addictive, and suddenly she understood how those who left the beyond could decide they didn't want to go back. Yet her sense of hearing was causing her aggravation. Be silent, all of you, she said, and was pleased when their argument stopped in its tracks. She found that she liked having a voice, and that she liked her own voice. You are all fools for ever considering a frontal assault of a fortified position. It's obvious not a single one of you knows a thing of war, of how to destroy an enemy. We are a small group of individuals with unique capabilities. Each of us is powerful in our own way. Correct? She asked, and demanded they nod with her steady gaze. Good. You can be taught, she said, once they had all submitted to her command. There is only one mode of attack available to us, and fortunately, it is one I am specialized in. Since the dawn of time, the forces of chaos have feared me and mine on the battlefield, yes, but even more so behind their lines. Unconventional warfare. The way she said the words gave the rest of the group goosebumps. Will be your cruel mother, and you shall suckle at her barren teat until you have a taste for blood. Ben said, eyebrows raised. Counterpoint. How about we just stop the gremlins and not develop a taste for killing and blood? It's too late for me, Short Bus said. Much the same way someone might say, yeah, Mom, I started smoking about 6 months back. I've already got the taste. I as well, Ghost Ears said, eyeing Red in a way that could be translated as, damn, that's a fine giant woman, then composing himself. But I admire Prince Ben's commitment to civility, truly befitting of royalty. I too, Vivi said. Also hunger for blood. It wasn't lost on anyone that Vivi had deepened his voice a little bit, or that he seemed to be way too excited. Okay, so it's just me and Vivi who aren't stone-cold killers then, Ben said. Okay, that's awesome. Lord Ben, Red said, her voice close to pained. Please be silent. You have walked with the pure beast, yet you do not understand goodness. Were she here, she would have already charged and slaughtered those monsters and stained her white fur with their blood and left still a pure beast untainted. You do not know what they are, but I do. I have fought these abominations across the wastelands of eternity, the battleground of perpetual conflict. Though their forms are different, and they are much diminished, I recognize some of them. They are wicked, chaos incarnate, and left unchecked, they will bring about a future of utter desolation. Even now they seek to give birth to a bladed slayer with a stolen soul that shines as bright as a star. Vivi blinked several times, his eyelids fluttering. Excuse me. A what? A bladed slayer, Red repeated. An enormous horned being covered in blades, which knows only hatred and aggression. How big? Vivi said, starting to breathe a little harder, causing Ben to feel like he was on a boat. 100 feet tall and still growing. His birthing sac is bursting through the canopy and spreading devouring tendrils throughout the area, which eat all they come in contact with. I have seen such things before on the battlefield, though I shudder to realize they can be created here as well. Cease your trembling, Vivi, she said, using his name for the first time. I know what we must do. Red started talking, and everybody quickly realized she was talking sense. Ben had often wondered what would happen when he put a living creature into his utility pocket. Would they die? Would they be placed into suspended animation? Would they black out? As it turned out, what happened to them was a bit stranger than that. Ben, I can't go in there, Vivi said, eyeing the utility pocket that wiggled its sea anemone-like tentacles at him in a friendly way. Lord Vivi, surely it can't be that bad, Ghost Ears said, looking at the portal with considerably less apprehension. It even asks you if you would like to be willingly put into an alternate dimensional space. Very advanced, at least as far as how I measure things."
"It's going to drain my mana," Vivi said, looking from person to person with big spherical eyes. "I'm a spellcaster. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to get dropped into a battle and start gnawing things to death with my delicate soft mouth?" Vivi demonstrated a few pathetic snapping motions with his admittedly silly-looking slug mouth. No teeth or hard parts at all. "I'm pretty sure you'll be fine," Ben said, allowing his intelligence to communicate with the utility pouch. It fed him not so much hard data as feelings and intuitions. "Yeah," Ben continued. "You'll be fine, for sure, as long as you don't move around too much. Also try not to breathe too much either. Really keep your mind clear as much as possible, because pretty much everything you do in there is going to cost you mana."
"Oh, I'm going to be just fine," Shortbus said, nodding his head. "I can blank out my mind instantly. Watch," he said, and suddenly had a dull, stupid expression on his face. Then he brightened back up. "Can you blank out anyone else's mind?" Ben asked, remembering that Shortbus had psychic powers. Shortbus said, then started looking really, really hard at Vivi, who seemed unaffected. "That's a negative. I could hit him with my anima blast, though," the shark said, giving Ben an exaggerated wink. Ben had no idea what the wink was for, but he was against the idea in principle. "I think you should save that for the gremlins. Vivi, it's not going to kill you." "It's gross," Vivi whined, staring at the open utility pocket and demonstrating just how dynamic the facial expression range of an Aeon slug could be, by displaying his open revulsion at the idea of going into the utility pocket. The purple tendrils continued to display a basic sense of humor, and wiggled at him, as if to say, "Come here." "How is it gross?" Ben asked, looking at the utility pocket and not seeing anything wrong with it. To him, it looked super friendly. "What if it's slimy in there?" Vivi asked. "Or wet, or weird, or—" "It's not any of those things. You won't even notice you're in there." Vivi looked unhappy, but he was already in deep in terms of getting outside of his comfort zone and overcoming disgust sensitivity for the night, so he steeled his nerves and glided across the ground into the open portal. The opening shrunk, then continued shrinking, until it was small enough to fit on Ben's body. He attached it to his right pinky finger, then spoke into the tiny entrance. "How are you doing in there?" "I hate this," Vivi moaned. "Well, really, it's not that bad," he said, immediately changing positions. "It's not stealing nearly as much mana as I thought it would." Ben nodded, then opened a pocket for Shortbus, who jumped into his from a running start. That pocket was placed on Ben's right middle finger for what would be obvious reasons. Finally, he opened one for Red, which would put him at his limit. "Remember the plan," she said, before stepping through and being attached to his left palm. Ghost Ears watched the proceedings with his arms crossed, hovering in the air without moving his wings. "Prince Ben," he said, his features hard but the emotion not directed at him. "Are you ready?" "Let's do it," Ben said, his voice not as powerful as he would have liked. The two of them, Ghost Ears and Ben, were extremely tiny. This conferred pages upon pages of detriments, disadvantages, and ways to die. There were a few benefits to being so small, though. Food was never a problem. A bottle of whiskey could last an entire fairy village a month of heavy drinking, and nobody noticed you unless you were trying to get their attention. Sure, they'd notice a swarm of fairies, but just 2 of them flying up high and trying to stay out of sight? No way gremlins would notice that. The fact that Ben could store a full-sized strike team in his 2 hands wasn't a known danger to the gremlins yet. Trust me,
They'd know about it by the end of the night. They were definitely going to talk about what was about to happen. The utility pouch was a funny item. If used like a portal to pass a creature through space, the cost was enormous. It would drain the being's entire mana pool and half of their total stamina, but only if the being in question meant to use the utility pocket as a portal. If it were used on an enemy, Ben would pay the price. But the thing was, if someone walked into the utility pocket of their own intention, they were on the hook for the mana cost. Even better, if an ally was stored in such a manner and the utility pouch was never closed, the mana cost for that was small. They weren't being stored away or teleported. They were just kinda hanging on. It was like they were in a special little pouch that could reduce their size and weight to nothing, one that they could control. Yes, as soon as his allies entered their respective utility pockets, they felt an immediate connection form with it. Either they, or Ben, could make the opening bigger or smaller. They could eject themselves, and even better, they could handle it like a physical object and carry it around. The gremlins would talk about this night for sure, and so would the fairies. Neither Ben nor Ghost Ears noticed, but a swarm of wild fairies, none of whom were from Strangetown, was quietly watching the events as they unfolded. Ben flew, examining the veritable horde of gremlins and gremlin variants below, and silently thanking Red for talking some sense into them. They would never, ever have made it with a frontal assault. Ghost Ears flew near him, his eyes not looking at the gremlins but the forest around them, guarding Ben. That was his only job in this mission, to keep Ben from getting eaten by one of the 10,000 kinds of monsters that he was an easy meal to. The true elf fairy gently changed their course, noticing a hanging mucus web weaver and seeing that Ben was completely oblivious to the hazard. The fact that Ben had gotten as far as he had in the Overcavern Forest alone and ignorant was nothing short of a miracle. The protection of the Ring of Sacrifice could do that much at least. Ben was nervous, but the calm, mild kind of nervous that comes from being an extremely hard-to-hit target, flying hundreds of feet above anything that wanted to get him. Ghost Ears set their pace, allowing Ben to really take in the details of the gremlins' camp. After solid minutes of observation, Ben concluded that it was absolute chaos down there. The gremlins had rejected all sense of order, swarming and crawling over one another, yelling for no reason, and generally being extremely rude and physically violent with one another. If his life were a movie, Ben thought, the scene below would either be blurred out or push his rating to MA. "I think my life is rated R right now," Ben said, bringing Short Bus's utility pocket closer to his mouth. Silence. Then the shark made a sound like he realized something. "Oh, right. I'm nodding my head, but you can't see that. I really don't know what that means." "It means the things happening to me aren't appropriate for children or adults to see," Ben said, his teeth chattering a little bit from the dark chill of the forest. Short Bus laughed. "I'll say, hey, think we could catch a couple of those furry guys in one of these utility pouches? I've got some ideas," the man-shark said, sounding suddenly evasive. "No." "Well," Ben said, thinking about it, "no. 5 is my limit for the number of utility pockets I can have open at any one time. That's how it is right now, at least. Plus, in terms of total volume, I'm getting somewhat close to my limit." "Oh, I see. Just keep it in mind for later, then," Short Bus said, then dropped the conversation. "Yeah?" he said. Then Ben also dropped it. "Gremlin bomb," Short Bus said suddenly. "Toss it and boom! A bunch of monsters burst out and attack what you threw at it. Hilarious!" he said, his voice having the kind of positivity that had to be intentional. "Yeah," Ben said, laughing just a very little bit. Note to self, The conversation was pointless. It was just mindless chatter between people who were about to engage in a life-and-death struggle. Vivi was uncharacteristically quiet, but honestly, he had a lot to think about. Red was quiet as well, but that was nothing new. Ben endeavored to learn as much about her as he possibly could, just as soon as he found her a shirt and some pants. Or a sundress. No, damn it, Ben, no sundresses. If he were being perfectly honest with himself, which he'd gotten pretty good at, he would admit that Red kind of fucking terrified him. She had been nice enough so far, but she was scary looking and gave off a deeply unsettling vibe. It was the fear a 6-year-old boy had of teenage girls who had a bunch of piercings, black clothes, tattoos, and a rebellious attitude. Ben scratched his hair in frustration, then realized what he just thought was completely wrong. Red was extremely confusing, and at the first available opportunity, he was going to put her through a job interview. The thought made Ben smile, because putting Red in interview clothes would do a lot to humanize her, and also because, as an isekai protagonist, the special technology he brought with him from Earth was the EQ interview and its ability to reveal inner psychology. Then again, Red was also technically an isekai protagonist, just not one from Earth. The thought troubled him for formless, undefined reasons. Short Bus was also technically an isekai. "Prince Ben," Ghost Ear said, his voice a whisper. "I see the elder gremlins now." Ben looked away from his thoughts and was greeted by a sight. "Wow," Ben said, not even able to be disgusted so much as impressed by the outbreak below him. Thousands of brightly colored, glowing, pressurized, fluid-filled... They looked like boils or cysts, but the skin over them was completely transparent and they were filled with glowing radioactive Kool-Aid. The gremlin cysts covered everything. The ground, the tree trunks, out onto branches. The only thing they didn't grow on were other cysts, and they were tightly packed against one another. A cabal, because even at this distance and without the proper intellectual context, Ben could tell he was looking at a cabal of gremlins, congregated in the way leadership does. There were 13 of them, gathered in a circle around a shining, rainbow-hued rock. Each of them had a spine, an entire spine, which they were using as staves. Their furry bodies were painted with white symbols, and the designs were ugly in an emotional and an intellectual way. The other gremlins were obviously terrified of the elders and kept their distance. There was also a gigantic, red, hundreds of feet tall, glowing, pulsing gremlin cyst containing the bladed slayer. It twitched and flexed its sword like fingers, and the more Ben looked at it, the more he realized it was a creature that couldn't even feed itself, because it was optimized for destruction and slaughter. "Yep," Ben said. "We're here." He clapped Ghost Ears on the shoulder and looked him in the eye. "It was nice knowing you, even though I don't know you at all. Let's talk, like really talk, if we get through this." Ghost Ears nodded, Ben nodded, and then the prince angled downward and began accelerating. The wind rushed past him, and for a moment everything was quiet and he shut his eyes. Then, when he was close enough and the fall wouldn't kill him, Ben pointed his middle finger at the most important-looking gremlin and shot Short Bus at him, like the world's most creative bullet. The shark came out in the most loud, attention-grabbing way possible. He was roaring and moving about in the air, and when he landed, he immediately bit one gremlin, grabbed another with his hands, and brutally killed one with a strong strike of his long tail. There was a long, single second where the elder gremlins had no idea what was happening, and Short Bus rampaged without resistance. Then, Ben pointed his pinky finger and shot the Aeon slug at them. Vivi was overly excited, and his eyes were thrashing around, his body was undulating with bright rainbow light, and his high-pitched war cry would never leave Ben's memory. Vivi arrived in a barrage of large magical arrows, which he was firing indiscriminately. An elder gremlin took a step backwards and fell straight into a disc of annihilation and was promptly, well, annihilated. The gremlin elders started to act to organize themselves, so Ben pointed his left palm at them and shot Red at the group. She landed softly on the ground, and the elder gremlins froze in place, various looks of terror on their faces. Red smiled, her eyes locking them in place. She said something that Ben couldn't hear, but sounded like, "Did you all miss me?" She walked right up to the frozen gremlin and grabbed the soul gem. Ben accelerated down towards the soul gem and used his favorite skill. "Whap!" Ben said. And Red was gone, safely inside her utility pocket attached to his hand. Thousands upon thousands of gremlins had begun to rush on their location, and any second now, they were all going to die. Ben rushed over to Vivi and slapped him with a hand, and the Aeon Slug vanished in a flash of purple light. Ben's heart was pounding in his chest. He grabbed Short Bus and executed his critical role in the operation. "Tactical withdrawal!" Ben shouted, using the skill he'd gotten after destroying Greyport 3. It was a funny skill, in that it greatly increased his speed, but only when he was running away from a fight he started. Ghost Ear struggled to keep up. The little fairy was doing his best to dodge arrows and thrown rocks and to block them from hitting Ben. Up and up, higher and higher, the two of them went. They'd gotten away! A utility pocket opened in front of Ben, and a burst of air completely messed up his flight path. Then it was followed up by another utility pocket that blasted him with a heavy, sticky slime. He immediately started falling. Whatever the slime was, it had the effect of completely cutting him off from his mana supply. Little utility pockets opened around him, blasting him with air and adjusting his course down to the ground, keeping him from hitting a tree. Ghost Ears, though Ben couldn't see it, had gotten stuck to a branch. Ben impacted against something soft, and the slime glued him to it. He couldn't breathe, but then something extremely large wiped across his face, removing the slime. Ben looked up and saw a human with empty-looking eyes, giving him an apologetic look. "Close, little guy, real close. I'm Nemo. Well, I'm stealing that finger gun thing. Bang, bang, out comes a monster. Classic." He made finger guns when he said bang, bang. Ben tried to release Short Bus, but to his alarm, Nemo was doing something. Ben couldn't access his utility pocket. Every time he tried, he felt something pushing against his brain. No. Yeah, no," Nemo said, shaking his head. "Not happening. Come on, I'm gonna introduce you to my friends. They're dying to meet you," he said with an exaggerated wink. "I fucking hate void souls," Ben muttered as he was carried to his fate. High above, Ghost Ears watched. And the swarm of wild fairies watched as well. Chapter 14. "This thing is creeping me out," said a woman made entirely out of shining golden-orange glass. Her body moved like something of flesh and blood, and normally she would pigment her body to appear to have skin, and paint her face so that it was more obvious what her facial expressions were. But out here, in the Overcavern Forest, well, those pigments were expensive, and there was no way they would last even a round of combat. Who the hell put on makeup before a fight? She might be a sunlet, a member of the 3 signatory races, but she wasn't rich anymore. That's why she took up adventuring. For the money. "There is no need for alarm," said a being. It was a floating machine about the size of a watermelon made of metal. He was rigid and angular. His body had been created for function over form. Some parts of him were reflective and silver, while others were as dull as cast iron. A single red lens was nestled near the top of his body, which served as the machine being's eye. Long metallic tubes hung limp from the AI being, like vines on a jungle tree.
Well, it's not making me feel safe.
The speaker was well, this is just a confusing thing to have to describe with words. It was a higher music elemental, and to describe its body would require both narrator and listener to imbibe a dose of LSD to make any sense at all. Still, in simple terms, it was being made up of 3 rings. A small one, the size of a wrist that floated about a foot off the ground. A large one, the size of a hula hoop, that came to about navel height on an average human, and another wrist-sized one at about where the collarbones would be on that same average human. The rings were perfectly spaced and contained a clearly defined field of distorted white space. The space churned like someone had thrown a bunch of rainbows and sunrises into a pot and set them to boil. The field of acid trip visuals terminated in sharp points at both ends. He resembled 2 pointy, empty ice cream cones that had been put together opening to opening. Standing with them, holding a blank white, unadorned box, was a system custodian wearing a party hat. The system custodian was an absolutely enormous sphere of dark blue crystal, about 2.5 feet wide, with a total height around 6'4". Its arms and head consisted of angular solid blocks of gold, held in place by some kind of invisible energy field. It had the appearance of a humanoid, with incredible upper body strength, broad shoulders, wide chest, and a narrow waist. It had no legs, and floated without apparent effort. System custodians were considered a special challenge, rewarded to individuals who had exploited the rules to the extent that it threatened the balance of the world. The gold they were made of was the kind of gold the money of the world was made of, which made the system custodian just insanely valuable. Like, oh my God, won the lottery valuable. The system was always delighted when someone tried to take one down. Sometimes they succeeded, and he used the information to make the next generation of system custodians that much better. Mostly, almost always, actually, they failed and died. Sort of like a Game of Thrones-style lotto ticket. Either you win or you die, with about the same odds of victory as a regular lotto ticket. The 3 adventurers were not Solas's finest. They weren't even the ones Solas had requested for the task, which was to deliver the present to Vivi and then execute the dangerous criminal when the system custodian was gone. The team who had gotten the assignment hadn't felt like tromping through the Overcavern forest. So they'd hired an iron-ranked group instead. Mind you, they were the best iron-ranked adventuring team in Solas. But they were also the best iron-ranked adventuring team, the lowest rank of adventurer. The payout, however, which was half of what a gold-ranked adventuring team would make for a high-priority quest, was something they just couldn't say no to. Especially because their families had cut them off after they'd decided to become adventurers, to discourage what they considered dangerous folly. They also suspected a bit of foul play was afoot, as one of their bitter rivals had connections to politics. Who cares right now? We'll get into that in just a little bit. The group was competent, dangerous, had a system custodian giving them directions, and oh my God, were they so going to die. There were hostile beings from the beyond stalking them at this very second. They had almost no equipment. There were dangerous, gigantic snails in the canopy that were preparing to grab the adventurers with their enormous foot and envelop them in a flesh sack, leaving them to die a slow death as they were paralyzed and slowly digested. The snails were called sack lurkers. Just a fun fact, and they ate magic as much as they ate physical matter. There was even an opening to the second cavern layer at their destination, which was still raising the ambient mana in the area to dangerously high levels. This was the staging ground for an army of night fiends, which were humanoid bat creatures, which were like 96% bat and 4% humanoid. The only thing keeping them safe was the system custodian, who would not intercede on their behalf in a fight, but was a great deterrent to those who didn't know its purpose. It would take a miracle to get these unprepared, cocky teenage adventurers to their target alive. Frankie felt a surge of wild, manic energy as he flitted about the interior of the pocket of sanctuary with his two minions following his instructions exactly. The utility pocket elemental would have started laughing like a supervillain in a lab coat, a mad genius, had he been able to laugh, or had he thought of doing it. Because Ben's request was looking more and more doable with each passing second. The system, at least the small portion that had been assigned to manage Frankie, watched the little utility pocket elemental work and started to sweat. He pressed a button on his desk, a red button, which simply said "Help" on it. Immediately, he felt more resources allocated to his instance, which he put to work at once. "This is just insane," he said, watching the creature as it modified the skill entirely within the rules and not unbalancing a thing. The system drummed his claws against his desk, then realized something. He'd never actually bothered to learn exactly how the wand of Create Minor Elemental worked, because he hadn't been the one to invent it. That honor belonged to the dwarves, the system said, his words coming out as a sigh. "They can't ever just make something work. They always have to," he grumbled. "They just always go overboard over the simplest—" He picked up a desk phone and called their leader, who had also been the one to design and submit the plans in exchange for basically nothing. That should have been a red flag in hindsight. "I told ya!" The thick accent of the dwarven leader, Earth Ragnar, came through clearly on the phone. "And you didn't listen? I told ya it was a good spell. You got to be sweating up there, eh? You gave out those wands like cheap party favors at every opportunity, and now you got tens of millions of them sitting around in crates in the back of every general store in the world." The dwarf cackled on the other end of the line, his laughter mocking. I told you, and you didn't listen. Eat worms, you big red—" The system hung up the phone and decided he'd try and figure out how the wand worked on his own.